Hey y'all, welcome back to Millennial in the Middle. If you're new here, I'm Rachel and I am a first year middle school history teacher for Baltimore City. And I'm like mixed emotions right now of teaching. Just because I'm not sure how we're going back yet, and I'm like really praying that we do go back virtually. If we don't, that's a little scary. But still, I'm excited for like the learning aspect. I'm excited to teach, and so I've been using my summer like most teachers and reading and preparing for the new school year. So I'm going to take you into the books I have read to prepare for teaching. I'm going to do most recent reads to oldest. So I just got this not too long ago. It's Teaching for Black Lives by Rethinking Schools publication. If you don't know what Rethinking Schools is, it's basically an offshoot of the Zen Education Project, which was established after Howard Zinn wrote A People's History of the United States. So the Zen Education Project teaches teachers how to teach a people's history. And then Rethinking Schools is really talking about more social justice oriented mindsets when it comes to education. And so what I really liked about this book was the second chapter, or second section I should say, which is about how to teach Black history, because again, I'm coming from a bachelor's and a master's in history, so the way I interpret history and the things I know is like very different from what an 8th grader would know. So I still need that practice in understanding like what is appropriate for 8th grade, like what I can expect from 8th graders. I also like the section on gentrification and displacement. I think that that's something that a lot of students already pick up on, and we do a disservice to students if we shy away from these topics. I think that there's a number of things that they show in this book that are just amazing work that's being done across disciplines, across subject areas, and I think that every teacher should read that book. Another book that I know a lot of educators have read or are reading, have purchased within the last few weeks, is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? So this book talks a lot about racial identity development for kids, and what I really learned from this book was actually not about Black students. It was about students of color, of Latinx, Native, Asian, and Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, like those groups, and also a little bit about understanding how to teach white kids about whiteness, if that makes sense, and learning that, you know, a lot of people do think that whiteness is the norm and they don't question that. And so that was interesting, but I do think that, you know, every educator is right to pick up that book. I hope that every educator is actually reading that book and all of the other Black books that they are picking up. This is something that I think every teacher, I mean, I know it says the new teacher book, but I think every teacher should read it, because I think it's one of those books that you constantly return to. There's so many different things in here, like teaching for social justice and learning about how to honor students and their unique heritages, especially through their names. Don't try to give your students a nickname because you don't want to take the time to pronounce their name correctly. Also talking about parent engagement, assessments, things of that nature. I think that I'm even going to return to it like probably within my first year. Another book that I think every educator should read is Push Out the Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools. I think that everything was so on point, and I really liked how you actually heard from the different Black girls and their experiences, from, you know, being seen as defiant, being seen as having an attitude, being seen as hypersexual, being seen, like, so many different ways that Black girls are stereotyped in school, so many ways that they're criminalized in school, and then understanding that so that she can work against that is very important. Along with that is We Want to Do More to Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and the Pursuit of Educational Freedom. This book gave me the language for a lot of things I had already been thinking, because in graduate school I did do a lot of research on Black education as a social justice issue. And I think that in some of my interviews, I probably scared some of those educators because they just were not ready for the types of things I was talking about. But, you know, in the school that hired me, I think that we were on the same page that we need our students to understand a lot of these social justice issues. And they are not constrained to the stereotypes and the structures that hold them in a particular place. And so abolitionist teaching, I think, is just right for me. I really liked how she broke it down and talked about the different ways that educational reform does not work in the way that people think it does. It is actually antithetical to something like Black Lives Matter. I also really like how, you know, this follows in the tradition of many Black activists over the 20th century and prior to. I think that we do ourselves a disservice by not listening to what those before us have said and done. They have the blueprint, and we just have to keep building on top of it to make sure that we get to a place of true freedom. Then I read Lies My Teacher Told Me, Everything Your American History Textbook Got Wrong. My mom is currently reading it. So what I'm gonna just say really quickly is that the way history is taught in schools is that it discourages critical thinking, it discourages the skills of being an actual historian. And what I think a lot of teachers are doing now is working against that, because this book is actually as old as I am. I'm 25, the book is 25. And it's strange that like nothing has really changed on a systemic level. The things that individual teachers are doing is just that it's like individual work. And so something that this book talked a lot about was like hero making, and how, you know, the narrative that's being portrayed is just not accurate at all. It's really about memorization of a specific type of narrative they want to push. And that's the thing too, is that history is about interpretation of sources. So if you're not picking sources, if you're not telling your students to craft their own narrative, how are they learning history? Maybe they're learning like what you want them to know about history, but they're not learning anything about like how to be critical thinkers, how to understand sources, how to understand information. This is the first book that I read this summer, which is better than Carrots or Sticks. I think Carrots or Sticks is like about office management or something like that. And then this one is just about classroom management and restorative practices. I really like this because it gives you like real scenarios and real strategies to use, and it sets it up so it's not just like, okay, yeah, you want to do restorative practices, but it takes you like level by level of understanding what restorative practices really is. And, you know, all of the stuff that I've read, I know that I need to do like the PD trainings on it too, right? Like the reading is one step, or maybe the PD is one step, but like merging the two and being consistent in that is really what's going to get me on the right track. And so these are the books that I've read since June. There are some other books that I have that I just didn't get a chance to read yet because I'm not reading any more this month to just get ready for my move. But these books I am reading for content knowledge. So I have an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. When we do end up going back in person, this will be part of my library because this is for young people. And then I have an African American and Latinx history of the United States. I have, a few other books. Oh, I just got this book too, which is a graphic adaptation of the United States Constitution, which I think is really cool. So that's going to be part of my library as well. But I think it's important to learn a people's history so that you understand more about, the average person, their life, and not really learning your history through the role of the president or any of that, because that's just wrong. That's wrong on so many levels. And then, so these are some of the books that I read before I even knew I was going to be a teacher. So this is Young, Gifted, and Black. I was a honors student growing up, and so I wanted to know more about, the general sort of experience for gifted students that are Black. And I like this book because it talks a lot about the resource gap that is often named the achievement gap, and this also talks about the history of Black education a little bit, so that it negates that myth that Black people do not care about their education, because we do. And I think that people believe that regardless of their race, and I think that we need to stop perpetuating that stereotype and that myth, because even if you just think about and this is something like I am looking forward to talking about in my class, but we think of American history in terms of the English language, right? Because that is the language that most people use, even though our country really doesn't have an official language. But if you think of something like in colonial America, there were anti-literacy laws put in place. And, over time, Black people have had to, circumvent that issue. And so the real issue, though, is that people think because there were anti-literacy laws, like, Black people were just walking around here dumb as day. No. They knew how to read. They had knowledge. They just couldn't read in English because they didn't come from English-speaking countries. Or they weren't even countries at the time. They were just, like, ethnic groups moving in certain areas, or, like, being stationed in certain areas that was their community. You know what I mean? Like, there were kingdoms, and that was what they, like, Black people, African people, like, we are not dumb. So stop saying that we're dumb. Stop acting like we're dumb. Understand that immediately after emancipation, Black people created all types of primary schools and colleges so that Black students can be educated. So that's that. This book, I recommend, like, everybody read. It's really good. I recommend everybody read all the books I have. But this one is really good. It's by Nadia Lopez. It's called The Bridge to Brilliance. And she is a founding principal of Mount Hallbridges Academy. And I learned about her from Humans of New York. Y'all know that Instagram page where they, like, have the picture and then somebody, like, shares a little story or whatever. So there was a boy a few years ago who was talking about how, his principal, Nadia Lopez, was the most influential person to him because she, instead of, like, suspending students, she talks to them about, like, the school to prison pipeline, basically, is what he was saying. And I thought that was really, really cool. And I got this book and I read it last summer because I had nothing better to do on my commuter train while I was going between Delaware and Philly for my internship. Did I tell y'all that I curated an exhibit? Because if not, I'll make a video on that. But so, like, this is, like, a book I would read on my commuter train because it was, like, an hour long and I really didn't have anything else to do. But it was a really good book that talked about, like, not only the ways that you have to set up your school community so that your students feel like they are in community, but also how you have to teach the teachers about what that looks like. Because some teachers have unfair expectations, not understanding the context and the circumstances that their students are actually in. And so she did a really good job of talking about what that process was like from start to, where the young boy had the post. There was a GoFundMe to take a few of them to Harvard. And then I can't remember exactly like when the book ends, but it ends shortly after all of the like publicity that they got. And you know, I am just amazed, and it is one of those books again that I'm going to return to. I think I'm going to return to all of these books that I got. They're like really, really great. And yeah, so that's just how I have been preparing. There are some books that I'm going to read throughout the school year. There's some books that I'm going to read in August, especially to prepare for the colonization era, because that is actually not my era. Like, that's not my area of expertise at all. I'm more of a 20th century kind of girl. But I am a middle school teacher, so I am teaching pre-20th century history. But that's fine, because I think that it gives me a real opportunity to teach students about, you know, Black history and understanding that, you know, enslaved people did fight back and did make contributions and did have culture, and all of these, you know, negating all of these stereotypes that so many of us believed for so long. And so yeah, that's how I've been preparing. But these are just some of the books that I felt, you know, were really key to my politics, to my idea of what I want my classroom to look like. And I hope that you all found this video to be helpful. Please leave me a comment on what kind of books you have been reading this summer to prepare for the classroom. And make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I hope to see you all next video, where I probably will talk about my exhibit and how you can use it for your classroom and how it really talks about student voice. So I will see you then. Bye!